Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my final round game from the Dubrovnik Advent Open tournament I played this month. And you're going to see the von Hennig Gambit, a gambit I've never seen before this game. I just didn't know it. I was terrified during the game that I'd entered my opponent's prep, and I thought I was going to lose for the first 20 moves. Whether I was losing or not, we're going to find out at the end of the video, because I have not used the engine to check my game. After the game, I was drinking coffee in the hotel lobby, and my opponent came to me and told me about two positions. He was using the engine to analyze the game afterwards. He told me that my decisions were okay, when we both thought that I may have been losing. That's as much as I know. In any case, the von Hennig Gambit. After d4, d5, I played c4, my opponent played e6, I played knight c3, and my opponent played the Tarrasch. Now, I'm aware of the Tarrasch. I have studied it a lot, but I was focusing on c takes d5, and as you're going to see here, on the main move, e takes d5. And I know many lines after this. At the time, I knew that cd was a move, but I have to be honest, I have never studied it seriously. And in this position, I had my first think of the game, basically. I couldn't decide between queen a4 and queen d4. Now, I don't know what's better. I have not used the live book to check whether what we were playing is theory. We're also going to find that out. But basically, if queen a4, my opponent can either play queen d7, which maybe works, I don't know. Maybe works, or bishop d7. And if bishop d7, I think I can safely take on d4 and not enter the complications we had in the game. Now, whether it's worth it to develop my opponent's bishop during the game, I have decided no. So I played queen d4, seeing that knight c6 was possible. And I looked at lichess to see whether this has a name. Apparently, in about 2 moves, this is about to become the von Hennig Gambit. So it has been played before. It's theory. I didn't know it. In this position, I taught for, I think, 20 minutes. The game was played on live board, and you can actually check the exact timestamps if you want to. Ended up playing queen d1. I honestly had no idea whether any other move allows me to survive. So queen a4 doesn't work. It's as simple as that. My opponent can take, and so what? I don't know. Queen g4, my opponent takes. Queen d3, knight b4. I'm constantly hanging the c2 pawn, the c2 square and the rook. So I played queen d1, knowing what was about to happen. My opponent played d5, and I took on d5. My opponent played bishop e6. Now this is the von Hennig Gambit, and I traded queens. And I got this far before I played queen d1. And I couldn't decide what to do a move from here, or even what to do here. So I can go e3, but it seems extremely messy to allow knight b4. So e3, knight b4, bishop b5, check. King e7, king f1 was one of the lines I was looking at. But I didn't like that. My king is on f1. I also knew that on bishop d2, I would have to make a tough choice after knight b4, but at least I will have a choice. So I played bishop d2. Now the main issue here, of course, is knight b4, knight c2, or knight d4, knight c2. If I could play a3 and e3, I think white could be close to winning, because there are no tactical problems. Since I cannot, I have to find a weird way to defend against this. So I played bishop d2. And on knight b4, I have a choice. I can castle queenside, I can go rook c1, or I can go king d1. If I castle queenside, I give the pawn back. Of course, I'm up a pawn. I give the pawn back, and my king is absurd. And it's going to get mated down the c-file. Let me just show you that. So takes, takes, bishop takes. What am I supposed to do on rook c8? So this was very quickly discarded. If I go rook c1, this may be the safest option. But again, takes, takes. bishop takes, e3, I think a6 is necessary to prevent bishop b5, and maybe knight f3. Seems like a reasonable position, but my opponent has the 2-1 majority on the queen side, and this felt extremely uncomfortable. If the pawn ever reaches a4 and the bishop sits on b3, I think I'm much worse, and I don't see a way to prevent that. So I've decided to gamble, and I played king d1. My opponent told me two things after the game. First of all, he told me, I realized I was down a pawn, I didn't know that, and that he didn't know it was theory. He only noticed he was down a pawn somewhere here, but he also saw that he had a huge initiative. And the second thing he told me is that he thought king d1 was losing. My reply was, I thought rook c1, castle's queenside, and king d1 were bad for white, but this way I keep my pawn. So I just played king d1 because I couldn't see an immediate refutation, and I get to keep my extra pawn. Now the thing is, if I go a3, b4, chase the knight away and consolidate, I'm up a pawn. If I go into the other two lines, the material is equal and my position is still bad. So I figured, why not go king d1? Okay, my opponent played knight f6. Now I can play e3 or e4. One of those is necessary, and against both, my opponent has to play a6. So I played e4. And if he doesn't play a6, then bishop b5, and I'm perfectly fine. I go bishop b5, knight e2, and a6, king c2. So a6. And once again, what do I do? There's a threat of knight g4 now, picking up the f2 pawn. So I figured, okay, I mean, I have to prevent that. Let's save the pawn at the same time. So f3, I just couldn't see another candidate move. Of course, I'm not doing anything for my development. It seems like I'm an idiot playing king d1 and f3 and stuff like that. But I felt it was necessary because, once again, if I consolidate, I'm up a pawn. Okay, bishop c5. I was kind of worried about bishop d6 and the bishop coming to this square eventually. For example, rook takes d2, king d2, and bishop f4. It seemed very scary because my king is completely restricted, but I think it doesn't work. So bishop c5, and now finally I get to unpin king c1. Okay, now my bishop can move. And of course, if I had done something else, I don't know, knight e2, then I just lose a piece. So I have to unpin king c1. h6 by my opponent is a move I definitely cannot justify. I see what it does. It prevents bishop g5, pinning the knight to the rook, now that the bishop is unpinned. But I don't think I can trade that bishop. I would never do that, because if I take on f6, gf6, and then bishop e3 is coming, my king is completely naked. So at this point, I finally got a chance to play a3. And now I felt like I could breathe, finally. It seemed like my position just became playable. The knight came to c6, and I had a choice here, b4 or bishop e2. In my mind, the way I lose this is if this bishop comes to b3 and the knight comes to d4, and I have no way of challenging those two pieces. So I wanted to play bishop e2, bishop d1, and knight e2. That way my knight is covering d4, my bishop's covering b3, and my position is safe. You may think that b4 comes with tempo, but it doesn't, because on b4 my opponent plays knight d4. And this is, if I take, then check. And where does my king go? The bishop is hanging, the rook is hanging, the rook is here. This is, I thought this was losing. So on knight d4 I would have had to play rook b1, and then let's say the bishop moves back and I develop. Seems okay. But what I did in the game at the time seemed cleaner. Now it doesn't anymore. So I played bishop e2. My opponent played bishop b3. And I had expected this, and I played bishop d1. And I think my opponent made a big mistake here. A mistake after which white controls the game, consolidates, and is likely much better or winning in a couple of moves. My opponent played knight d4, which doesn't work. My opponent should have taken. Takes, king takes. And now bishop e3. Okay? I had calculated this hopefully correctly. So knight b1 has to be played. My opponent castles. And now I was going to go b4 to play rook a2. But this seems much worse for me than the game continuation. I don't know, knight h5 coming into f4. I have to defend knight e2. And then f5 just breaking the structure. And I think I'm either equal or worse. In the game though, on bishop d1, my opponent played knight d4. And now the position is safe and perfect and easy to play. And I'm up a central e-pawn and everything is like a fairy tale. Knight g2, all of my pieces are good. Now of course I'm threatening to take and take. So my opponent needs to trade some pieces. So knight e2 check, knight e2. Okay? And now the bishop gets chased away. The other bishop gets chased away. My pieces come to life. The bishop came to e6. I played b4. The bishop dropped back to e7. I played bishop c3. And now look at my bishops. My king is coming to b2. And all of a sudden, my position is very easy to play. My opponent castled, king b2. Bishop c4, knight d4. Could you imagine a better knight in this position? I think by not taking on d1, my opponent allowed me to get a very easy game. g6, preventing knight f5 makes sense. Bishop c2. Maybe I could have played bishop b3, but I wanted to keep the pieces on the board for the moment. If we get this, this is also, of course, perfectly fine. My bishop is great after g6. But I played bishop c2. Later on I played bishop b3 anyway, so bishop c2 proved to be a waste of tempo. But I don't think it's a big deal. Knight d7, the knight is coming to e5 or to c5 if my b-pawn moves. Rook a d1, bishop f6, f4, why not? I want to go e5, chase the bishop away. And basically I wanted to get an endgame in which we both have a dark squared bishop, and maybe a rook on the board or two pairs of rooks, because if I get my pawn to e5, my opponent's dark squared bishop will be very bad, and I'll be threatening e6. Bishop g7, bishop b3. Now, with this structure where I can play e5, I've decided to trade light squared bishops. So takes, rook fe8 on my pawn, rook he1. I think playing e5 would have been slightly premature. Maybe f6, e6, and my opponent can round up this pawn. I didn't want to commit too early, so I just defended my pawn. Knight f6, now, of course, e5. Knight d5. And I think this was... what I did here was a mistake. I think I should have gone bishop d2. I defended the pawn, but I think my opponent could have taken, and without a dark squared bishop, it would be very hard to make progress here. For example, f6. Okay, I have to defend. Fine. Rook d1. If fe5, I can play knight e5. And whether I have any chances in this endgame, I don't know. This is my analysis after the game. Maybe rook e7. I mean, I have a better king, but I definitely shouldn't be able to win. Probably white has a slight advantage, but I don't think it's enough to win. Instead, after g3, my opponent dropped the knight back. And now, after a4, I'm starting to regain control over the position. And with the dark squared bishop still on c3, it's a much easier game. And I had a plan here. I wanted to get my knight to e3 to challenge the d5 square. Once I do that, if we trade knights, I get the dream endgame I was talking about. So that's exactly what I did. Got my knight to e3, defending d1 in time. And my opponent obliged. He played knight d5. And at this point, I knew I was about to win. Because with this pawn structure, with a single pair of rooks on the board, this is completely unplayable for my opponent. I'm just going to get my king to e4, play g4, f5, create a passed pawn, and eventually have an easy win. So knight takes, rook takes. And I tried to figure out the best way to trade rooks, so I played king c2. I don't think it matters what I do. I can take once and go king c2. I can take once and go king c4. But this seemed cleaner, because now I can either get the d-file or trade all the rooks. If we trade all the rooks, then I think it's almost an automatic win. Because I get my king to e4. Once again, this is, I'll have a passed pawn on e6 and it will be hopeless, which is exactly what happened. So I think my opponent should have tried to avoid trades, but he didn't. Okay, king e6, g4, I'll just play f5, and for some reason my opponent played a5, giving up a pawn. I asked him after the game, he said, I don't know why I did that. That's exactly what I did in round 5 against international master Plenkovic. I just gave up a pawn. That's what happens when you're much worse. You make bad moves. So I just took ba5. Bishop c5, f5 check, and passed pawn. There really isn't much to say about this. I took on g6. I have a passed pawn on e6, so e6 check. King d8. And king c4. I think I could have won with king d6, but it seemed cleaner to just do this and pick up the b pawn and have two queens, or two, sorry, passed pawns. So I went king c4, bishop e5, defending my pawn, and threatening to queen so that I can free up the b6 square. So king b6. Bishop c7, trading the a pawn for the b pawn, but that doesn't matter. The fact that I have two a pawns doesn't mean anything. I just want one passed a pawn. So here, and now if we trade bishops, I win. If my opponent moves the bishop, I have bishop d8, and I just queen my a pawn. There was one final trick where my opponent may have been able to sack the bishop for a pawn, but unfortunately for him, I saw it and it didn't work. So a5, bishop takes, king e7, and now I could go wrong and maybe end up in a drawn endgame, but after g5, no way, because my bishop will always sit on f6 or d8 or h6, whatever, defend the pawn, and I will win. So my opponent resigned here. It was hopeless as soon as knight d5 was played, I think. I think after knight d5 there is no hope. But we will see with the engine. Now, this is the game I was most anxious to have a look at with the engine, because I honestly had no idea what I was supposed to do. So let's start here. Let's turn on the book as well. Okay, queen a4 is a move. Queen takes d4 is a move. Fine. Knight c6. Queen d1. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn on the engine. Queen d1. Queen d1, and it says plus 0.4. Okay, how can this be better for white? E takes d5. Okay, queen takes d5. And now this is the Schara Gambit, but bishop e6 is the von Hennig Gambit. Okay, so everything I did so far was correct, except for spending 20 out of the 60 minutes I had. Queen takes d8, rook takes d8. Okay, e3 plus 0.5, bishop d2 plus 0.5. I played bishop d2. Knight b4. Okay, rook c1. There's also rook b1. I haven't even considered that. Why would I go rook b1? Okay, castle's queenside is equal. King d1. Okay, it's not too bad. Minus 0.3. Okay, that's fine. Knight f6. Ooh, e4 is a big mistake. I should have gone e3. Yeah, actually, what the hell do I do on bishop c5? Huh. So my opponent can allow bishop b5 check. I haven't even considered that the f2 pawn is hanging. Okay, that's why I should have gone e3 instead of e4. So, okay, a6, f3, bishop c5, king c1 forced. h6, okay, loses some of black's advantage. King e7 was better, or rook d7. a3. I wasn't afraid of knight d3 check. Okay, I should have gone b4. b4, knight d4, rook b1. Makes sense. Okay, on bishop e2 I was worse. Bishop b3. Okay, bishop b3 is the mistake. Sorry, I keep getting Windows pop-ups. He should have castled. Wait, don't I go bishop d1? Am I not fine here? Knight d4, knight e2. Wait, why is this... Why is this bad for me? Why is this so bad? Knight takes. Rook takes. Ah, okay, now I see why it's bad. Because the rook's hanging and the bishops are kind of double attacked. Okay. My opponent played bishop b3, bishop d1. Okay, now my reasoning was that bishop takes d1 was much better for black. Let's just check. King takes, bishop e3, knight b1. Apparently this is equal. Yeah, okay, all of my analysis was correct. Not knight h5, the engine plays knight e8. I hadn't even considered that. Okay, but apparently this is fine. And on bishop d1, knight d4, yes, okay. So finally white is better. And yeah, this is already a significant advantage. b3 instead of b4, why? Okay, b4 is fine. Bishop c3, okay, plus 1.5. Oh, this game turned around so quickly. Knight d4, almost plus 2. g6, okay, bishop b3 was better than bishop c2, but fine. Still in control, f4 best move. Knight b3 was better than bishop b3. Why would I want my knight on b3 if it cannot go to c5 after b6? Oh, maybe I provoke b6 and then go knight d4, knight c6. Okay. Here, here, here. Okay, this is fine, this is fine. Yeah, g3 was a mistake. I should have gone bishop d2. That's what I've been pointing out. I want to keep my bishop. He should have taken, but he didn't. Oof. a4. Yeah, and now... Okay, I could have taken, but I played knight e3. Yeah, on knight d5 it's over. Also, I could have taken with the rook. I didn't even consider that for some reason. Maybe because I was planning to go king c2. King c2 plus 2, rook d5, and e6 is plus 4. Okay, but this is good enough. This has to be good enough. Yeah, it definitely is. Okay, and I'm guessing I haven't made any mistakes from here. Yeah, seems simple enough. I took on g6 a bit later, but I don't think it matters. e6. Okay, king d6 was better, but king c4 is fine. a6. Ooh, that's a nice win. I didn't consider a6. Okay, yeah, but it's fine. Yeah, it's all winning. Do I have to play g5? Wait, I'm winning if I don't play g5, because even if I go king c6, I can prevent the king from coming in. Yeah, I can go. I have time to play this. Yeah, okay, it's fine. So that was the end of the tournament. Not a great tournament. I ended up winning and losing 0 points. The draw in round 6 and the draw in round 3 from those winning positions is what cost me the points. Had 2 losses, one to a grandmaster, one to an international master, and in both games I had at some point a slight advantage. No, I should have definitely lost round 2 against Grandmaster Nikčević. That was well deserved. Had I survived, that would have been a swindle. But in the final position where I blundered mate and or a piece, I had an advantage. So anyway, I'm playing my next tournament starting tomorrow. Tomorrow is round 1. I am going to record the game as soon as round 1 finishes. So wish me luck. Hopefully it's a good game. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.